Four civilizations. 1. Mesoamerica. The Olmec, Maya, Teotihuacan, and Aztec were not one continuous empire. They were separate powers, separated by centuries, but linked by trade, ritual, and borrowed ideas. And that raises the real question. If they were not one chain, then what held this Mesoamerican world together? This is the story of four civilizations that shared a world without ever becoming the same civilization. This is no history. The usual story says these civilizations followed one another in a neat line, but Mesoamerica was not a line. It was a world of rival cities, borrowed symbols, shared calendars, broken empires, and ideas that outlived the people who first built them. The first thing to fix is the map in our heads. Mesoamerica was not a single state, it was a cultural zone. That means different peoples could share habits, gods, goods, and symbols without sharing one ruler. The same ballgame could appear in different political worlds. The same maize economy could feed rival dynasties. The two calendar systems used across much of Mesoamerica could organize ritual life even when cities fought one another, and the same pyramid form could carry very different local meanings. That difference matters because political power, sacred legitimacy, and cultural memory were always at stake. A ruler needed labor, a city needed food, and a dynasty needed a story about why its power was rightful. That is why temples, roads, calendars, carved faces, and old ruins all matter in the same story. They are not decorations around history. They are the machinery of history. So instead of asking which civilization came first and handed everything down, a better question is this: how did separate societies keep remaking a common Mesoamerican world? Start on the Gulf Coast, at San Lorenzo, the earliest major Olmec center identified here, flourishing in Veracruz roughly between 1400 and 1000 BCE. Even before you get to the heads, the place tells you something important. This was organized power. Not because it looks like later empires, but because it took coordination to shape land, move water, move stone, and stage rulership. And then there are the colossal basalt heads. Many tons of carved stone, distinct faces, helmet-like headgear, almost certainly tied to unnamed Olmec rulers of San Lorenzo, even if their names are lost to us. What stayed with me most was not just the carving. It was the transport. Olmec colossal basalt heads were commissioned and transported from basalt sources in the Sierra de los Tuxtlas region to San Lorenzo, over roughly 60 kilometers or more. 60 kilometers does not sound impossible until you imagine that route in heavy stone, tropical humidity, floodplain mud, and no wheelbarrow shortcut waiting to save you. Every meter meant planning. Every pause meant feeding workers. That meant maize, water, ropes, and rest stations had to move with the monument. Every mistake risked losing a monument that had already consumed enormous labor at the quarry. And every successful delivery advertised the ability of a ruler to command bodies, time, and belief. That is why the heads matter as political evidence, not just sculpture. For years, people summarized the Olmec as the single mother culture of later Mesoamerica. I understand why that idea took hold. They were early, they were influential, and they were visibly monumental. But early does not automatically mean sole source. Influential does not mean exclusive. And many scholars no longer accept that old model in such a simple form. The evidence points instead to a broader, formative period interaction sphere. San Lorenzo mattered enormously, but it was one node among several, not the lone fountainhead of everything that followed. Now move east and south into the Maya world. Here, the political pattern looks very different. The Maya did not build one empire that swallowed every neighboring city for all time. They built a landscape of competing courts, dynasties, and alliances. And the crucial difference is that the Maya left far more writing. That changes the kind of history we can tell. With the Maya, rulers step closer to us as people. Not modern people, of course, but named actors with birthdays, accessions, wars, marriages, and funerary programs. One of them is Janaab Pakal I of Palenque, who came to the throne in 615 CE. Pakal matters here because he reminds us that Mesoamerican civilization was not one anonymous blur of pyramids. It was full of local histories, local rivalries, local claims to sacred right, and local memories carved into stone so later generations would read them. That writing gives the Maya a different kind of historical weight. Power is not only what you build, it is what you can record, date, and claim.
It is also what later archaeologists contest, because a carved date can be checked against other monuments in ways a silent sculpture cannot.
And yet the Maya still belong inside the same Mesoamerican frame as the Olmec, not because they descended in a straight line from San Lorenzo, but because they participated in a world of shared forms and adapted them in their own way. By this point, the pattern starts to emerge. Mesoamerica did not advance like a baton passed from hand to hand. It grew like a conversation. And then we reach the city that breaks almost every easy assumption. Teotihuacan was among the largest cities in the world for its time, yet we still do not know its original name. It stood in a sub-valley of the Valley of Mexico, about 40 kilometers northeast of modern Mexico City. By the early centuries CE, its population is commonly estimated at around 100,000 or more. And the city was planned, not improvised, planned. That matters because urban planning is political planning made visible. Someone decided where bodies would move. Someone decided where ritual would happen. Someone decided how a huge population would live inside apartment compounds instead of scattered hamlets. Those compounds matter more than they usually get credit for. They suggest that urban life here was structured, collective, and deeply organized below the level of the giant pyramids. Construction of the Pyramid of the Sun in the early 1st to 3rd centuries CE makes that scale impossible to ignore. This was concentrated power on a staggering level. But here is the second myth that starts to fail. Because a city is huge, famous, and excavated, we assume it must also be historically transparent. Teotihuacan is not. We still debate who exactly dominated it. Some scholars emphasize strong rulers. Others point to more collective or corporate forms of rule. The evidence allows debate because the city is rich in architecture and material culture, but poor in clear self-explanation. We still debate how power was shared inside it. We can trace obsidian tools, murals, burials, and neighborhoods, but we still cannot securely recover the native name the city used for itself, or the language it spoke with certainty. The more I looked at Teotihuacan, the clearer the paradox became. It is physically enormous, archaeologically rich, and still partly silent. That silence is not failure. It is the normal limit of ancient history, when texts do not survive or cannot yet speak clearly enough. The Aztec arrived much later, and they understood that they lived in a landscape already heavy with old power. They did not invent Mesoamerica from scratch. They inherited a world full of ruins, memories, and usable prestige.
and few ruins mattered more than Teotihuacan. The name we use now is Nahuatl. It comes from people who encountered the city long after its original builders were gone. So the Aztec helped preserve memory, but they also remind us that memory can arrive late and reframed. That is one of the most useful habits history can teach. A source can be precious and partial at the same time. The Aztec also show how empires use the past as raw material. If an old place already feels holy, a new power can claim it, reinterpret it, and stand taller because of it. That is inheritance as politics. By the Aztec period, Mesoamerica was still one connected world, but it was connected through reuse, conquest, commerce, and sacred geography, not through one uninterrupted civilization. So what does the comparison give us? The Olmec show early monumentality and elite power anchored in labor and stone. The Maya show how writing and dynastic courts turn politics into named history. Teotihuacan shows that scale does not guarantee clarity. And the Aztecs show how later powers mine the past for legitimacy. Put together, they do not form one empire. They form one Mesoamerican world, a world made by contact, adaptation, rivalry, and memory. And that, for me, is the payoff. The question is not which civilization owned Mesoamerica. The better question is how different societies kept rebuilding Mesoamerican life from the same repertoire of crops, rituals, monuments, and remembered places. This Mesoamerican world reminds us that civilizations do not have to be identical to shape one another.
But Teotihuacan still stands in full view, yet its original name and language remain out of reach. And the next mystery is who filled that city with a silence no text has yet broken. We follow the artifacts, the stone, the roots, and the scholarship first, and let the evidence decide what the story can honestly be. Comment with the detail that stayed with you most. The Olmec colossal basalt heads hauled from the Tuxtla Mountains to San Lorenzo? Until the next